Good morning. Well, actually, it's good afternoon. So we have to, let me start by apologizing. This is for our people, unfortunately, and it is Monday, Monday, March 23rd, but it is not 11 a.m. when we typically film this show. And of course, you know the reason. Philadelphia is on lockdown, it's on quarantine. So we got to respect that and kind of do this remotely. So I'm going to shoot this video at the house. I'm going to send it over to the super producer, Chris Arnold, and see if he can upload it to the site so you have something to watch and we can keep this consistent. We want to keep going week to week to week to week, and we'll try to figure out a way to have this jump off at 11 a.m. on Monday every week. I'm sure we could have figured it out this week, but you're dealing with an old man that's a little technologically deficient. So please bear with us. But we're going to try to keep this going because, again, our mission is to bring that black scholarship, bring black intelligence, bring black books to the people. Again, this is for the people. Honoring folks like Listervelt, Middleton, Tony Brown's journals, folks that came before us, that are bringing that knowledge to the people. I'm your scholar in residence at HakimsBookstore. Hakim's, we're down at 210 South 52nd Street between Walnut and Chancellor. Get that free parking on Chancellor. Beautiful black West Blackadelphia, as the Chris likes to say. Now I know right now probably can't come down, but we're going to be there for you when this thing passes. I know, unfortunately, this is going to be an economic disaster for a lot of people, but I promise you, whenever this is done, Hakim's Bookstore will still be in effect. 210 South 52nd Street between Walnut and Chancellor, beautiful West Philly. Again, check us out on Hakim's Bookstore on Facebook, Hakim's Bookstore on Instagram, Hakim's Bookstore on Twitter. You can find us in social media, give us a good review on Google or Yelp or what have you, and collect, I guess it's a 10% discount at the store. So we're going to do this, but again, we're going to just do this in a pretty truncated or shortened fashion. Again, I don't have the beats. I need my DJ, DJ Chris Arnold. As a matter of fact, I know everybody was checking out the D-Nice ciphers for the last 4 or 5 days. I peeped in a little bit, but I didn't spend that much time on it. I actually have still my writing and whatnot. My life really hasn't changed all that much. I was already an introvert that just I read, I write, and I watch sports. So my life hasn't changed other than the fact that there are no sports. And I should get a lot more reading and writing done. We'll see. Some of these shows are kind of good and they're a bit distracting. But one of the things I want to talk about is we mentioned last week that we're going to use this hiatus to start talking about creating businesses, to use this in a productive manner. So one of the things that I'd like to do is, as a tax scholar, as a commercial law professor, one of the things that I push for is for black law students and black lawyers to help ordinary black folks with a regular good job to start a business. In other words, well, not even just start a business, to convert their hobbies. Everybody's good at something. Everybody spends money on an activity that they like, right? But to convert that hobby into what the IRS calls an activity engaged in for profit, right? The reason why is because if it's an activity engaged in for profit, then you can actually deduct those losses that you suffer on the way towards making a profit. So your business may not make a profit this year or the second year, and maybe they'll make a profit in the third year. Well, if you're spending money to make money, right, this tax code gives you a subsidy or gives you a deduction to do it. So we want to convert your hobbies into activities engaged in for profit, and then we want that to be so successful that if it blossoms into a full-fledged business that hires our people. Right? Again, if we're going to talk about prison abolition, if we're going to talk about the school to prison pipeline, then we as black people are going to have to provide the jobs and the opportunities for those folks to work and earn a trade and build up their human, social, financial, and political capital. Not just theirs, but all of ours, right? As a group. So the first step towards that, as we ended last week's show, was to ask everybody, just pick what business do you want to start, right? And make it fun, right? Make it something that you want to do every single day of your life for 8 hours, 12 hours, 16 hours. Again, is it travel? Is it eating and you want to be a food critic? Is it watching movies and you want to be a movie critic? Is it sports? You want to be a sports announcer or have a blog or whatever, a scout or what have you? Are you a music person? Are you a poet? Again, whatever it is, I say this: what would you do if you didn't have anything to do, right? So imagine you have $5 billion or whatever the case may be, and your needs are taken care of for the rest of your life. Well, guess what? You're still going to have to get up every day and spend 24 hours on this planet, right? You're going to have to fulfill your true purpose, right? Your purpose is not necessarily to make money. It is not necessarily to work for others. So let's figure out what our purpose is, and then you work that day to day to make money, right? Let's flip it inside out. Let's invert that process. So you want to start a record label, you want to start a website, you want to start a chat room, whatever it is. So we're going to take another week and talk about that more specifically on we're going to select a business or a type of business, and I'm going to talk about how we're going to set it up from a hobby to an activity engaged in for profit, and then we'll talk even further about how to convert that to a business. And all this is going to culminate hopefully in April when tax filing day comes, April 16th, it's April 16th. Now they may push it back. They may push it back to like July or something, but that doesn't mean that you can't file until July. If you can file your taxes, if you are owed a refund, file your taxes right now. You can file your taxes for last year as early as January 1st, especially if you are getting a refund. There's no reason to let the government hold on to your money if they owe you a refund. So file your taxes as soon as possible. But I go back to saying that this idea of converting our hobbies into activities engaged in for profit so that we can collect the same subsidies others are collecting, right? Wealthy people don't have backyards, they have tree farms, right? What looks like something that just enjoy, right? They claim as an activity engaged in for profit. Having horses for their kids, is it just that, or do they have a legitimate horse boarding or horse raising, thoroughbred racing operation, right? So we're going to talk about what converts it from something personal to an activity engaged in for profit, how to make it something that is towards profit, making money. Now, before we talk about specifically a business, let's concede that a lot of us aren't ready at the moment, right? That we need to take care of our personal finances probably first, right? Before you start a business, man, you are a businessman, right? So take care of your business, take care of your debts, right? If you're paying interest, if you have high credit cards at 20% or 15%, well, then just paying off those cards is like investing money at 20%, right? You get it? So the fact that you could invest money, $100, and get 20%, right? You could make $20 for that year. Or you could pay off $100 debt and then be saved $20 of interest, right? So either gaining $20 or avoiding having to pay $20. It's all the same $20. So one of the first things that we can do financially to prepare for getting a business is pay down our very expensive interest rates and debts, right? To pay off our car note, right? To own the car, to own a home instead of leasing, right? Home ownership, the property gains in value. When your apartment gains in value, the landlord gets that. You don't get that, right? When you own your home, that appreciation in value can be borrowed off of to start or maintain a business. The interest that you pay is also deductible. It is subsidized by the government, where renting is not subsidized by the government. unless you're dealing with Section 8 housing and what have you. But we're talking about folks, we're talking about people that have a job, that are looking to elevate themselves from that job to activities engaged in for profit to businesses. And if that's the case, again, let's start taking care of our personal finances first. Let's get our house in order. Then we can talk about creating businesses that have investors or lenders or whatever the case may be. Another thing that you can do to prepare for being an entrepreneur without being an entrepreneur is to treat your job as your first client, right? Instead of dealing with the job as something that you just have to do and get through day to day and get out of by 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock. One thing we can do as far as changing our mentality and changing it towards entrepreneurship, and the fact that entrepreneurship requires effort 24 hours, 7 days a week. I mean, it is very rigorous. Let's not lie about that. One of the things we can do to prepare for that is to treat and see our current job situation as not a job, not a master-servant relationship. That's what it is in the law. A job or an employment is master-servant, but the law doesn't control your mind. So if you choose to look at your job as just your first client, I have one exclusive client at this time, right? It'll even make your job performance different, right? If I'm performing for a client instead of my boss, then my job is to make sure that client is pleased, and that's going to carry on to that customer service when I have my own business. So it's not personal. It's not whether I like my job or not. It's not whether I like my boss or not. I'm going to do that job well because I am going to satisfy this client, so this client can give me good recommendations, or I can find other clients, right? That my name, my reputation within this industry, whatever it is solid. Is somebody that produces scarce quality, right? Because if you're not producing quality, if you're not producing not just quality but scarce quality that can't be found everywhere, then why are we supporting your business when you get there? Right? So getting your own personal house in order financially, and also converting your mindset to treating your job as a client, as just your first client. And when you do that, knowing that leaving this job, going to another job, a better job, is just getting a better client. That's what you're supposed to be doing, right? And then a business owner is allowed to have multiple clients. So even if you were to stay in this very same industry where you're employed at, going from one employer to having several clients within that industry takes you from being an employee from being a servant to being an entrepreneur, right? So on the one hand, we could do something fun. We could do music or video or sports. On the other hand, we could do something even right within your expertise. In my younger days, I used to fix copiers, right? And filing systems and what have you, right? And instead of working with one, I worked with one job. Then I convinced that job to pay me hourly as a contract worker instead of a employee, because I could demand a higher rate, right? And then secondly, after that, well, since it only takes me a certain amount of hours to do this job, well, then pay me for that, right? And I know what it's worth to you, right? I already know how much this is worth to you. So I want that, even though I'm going to try to perform less hours. And because now I am free, now that I'm an independent contractor, I'm going to get other clients and do more or less the same with them, right? So on the one hand, we can imagine a very fantastic business that we've been dreaming about our whole life. On the other hand, we can take what we already know, what we're already expert at, and then try to convert that into a business. So again, I'm going to stop there, right? We're going to talk hopefully in more detail about this converting hobbies into activities engaged in for profit even more next Monday, the 30th. Again, we're going to take this Rona time, we're going to take this coronavirus time, and we're going to do something productive with it. But under our current circumstances today, we're going to truncate this discussion just a little bit and shorten it up. I always say that every week, and then we last an hour, but I don't think we're going to go an hour today. There were a few books out. I just want to mention them because, again, I want to keep us on point with doing this every week so we don't get backlogged. The Journal of Blacks in Higher Education did come out with a book list last week of 3 books that got dropped. First one is called A Drop of Midnight by Jason Diakite, right? It's a memoir by Jason Diakite. A second book that came out last week is In the Matter of Nat Turner. In the Matter of Nat Turner, A Speculative History by Christopher Tomlins and that was published by Princeton University Press. So I don't know what that's about other than the fact that it has Nat Turner in it. Is it about his legal case, a speculative history? Does that mean is imagining it like Django Unchained or whatever? I'm curious. I really don't know what this book is about. I'm definitely going to check out the jacket. So if it's something interesting, maybe I'll re-report on it next week. The last book identified by the Journal of Blacks in Higher Education is called Settler Colonialism, Race and the Law, Why Structural Racism Persists. Interesting. Settler Colonialism, Race and the Law, Why Structural Racism Persists. And this is by Natsu Taylor Saito, a well-known law professor. I don't think I've worked with Professor Saito at all. I do know the name. And this was published by New York University Press. And so this is also a book that I'll be very interested in. I'm also, for those that know, I was a former law professor for 15 years. I also operate the Economic Justice Law Review. And so we review books like this and give them a review and a short description on the website Economic Justice Law Review, which you can also find on Facebook or economicjusticelawreview.com. Just looking at the description of the book, it says how taking indigenous sovereignty seriously can help dismantle the structural racism encountered by other people of color in the United States. So this is why black folks should care about what happens to Native Americans or the Eskimo population. I guess that would be the same, but why fighting white supremacy is an inter-ethnic activity is what I'm going to call that. So 3 great books, 3 interesting books presented by the Journal of Blacks in Higher Education. A Drop of Midnight by Jason Diakite, In the Matter of Nat Turner, A Speculative History by Christopher Tomlins, and then Settler Colonialism, Race and the Law, Why Structural Racism Persists by Natsu Taylor Saito. Okay, so again, this is going to be short, and before we close it out, let me give thanks to the brother Michael Cord, or otherwise known as the attorney Michael X, and his weekly radio show on Sundays. I believe Radio Courtroom on WURD. That's 96.1 FM, 900 megahertz AM. Again, Black Independent Talk Radio. Love that format, and love the brothers' show, Solomon Jones and all the other folks that are on that show. So on Sunday between 11 and 1, Michael Cord has a radio show called Radio Courtroom. He invited me the last 2 weeks. 2 weeks ago, we spoke about black boycotts, right? My thing, of course, is economic justice. So we talked about black consumer boycotts and how they're protected by the First Amendment and how we ought to do them more often, and how we need to have a civil rights organization create an arm or perhaps a standalone organization that monitors and facilitates consumer boycotts to stop racial discrimination. And I think that's even more important right now because just today, the Byron Jones case was decided and the Supreme Court went against us again. And it was a unanimous decision. A unanimous decision, including Ruth Bader Ginsburg, including Stephen Breyer, including Justice Sonia Sotomayor, all held that in order to win a case of racial discrimination in contracting, you have to prove that you would have gotten the contract but for your race. In other words, proving that the person was racist, that they had a racist competition, that you had an anchor tied to your leg, doesn't mean anything. Right? That you have to somehow prove, like Billy Ray Valentine. Remember Eddie Murphy in Trading Places, where Billy Ray Valentine had to hide in a bathroom stall to catch Randolph and Mortimer Duke saying that they would never let a nigger run their company. That's the level of proof that you're going to have to get to win a case of racial discrimination in contracting. So let me give you another example. Imagine there's one roll of toilet paper left, right? We're in this corona pandemic. Imagine there's one roll of toilet paper left, and there's an auction. The store owner says, I'm gonna have an auction to see which customer gets it. And then he says, all black people, you're not allowed. You can't participate in this auction, right? Well, clearly, race was a motivating factor in denying you the toilet paper, but the Supreme Court says you still do not win unless you can prove that you would have won that toilet paper. You have to somehow prove that you would have outbid every single person in the auction. You essentially have to say, I was the wealthiest person in the room, and I wanted it I wanted it more than every person in the room. So the odds of a black person being the wealthiest person in town or the country is hard, if not impossible. And then two, to prove somehow that psychically I wanted toilet paper worse, more badly than anyone else. I don't know how you prove that. So they've set up a hurdle that in many instances is absolutely unattainable. And they know that. Right? So whether it's a tort-like right or whether they're a private attorney general, they set it up so it's a tort-like right. So even if you were to win that case and prove that you were discriminated against because you were black and did not get the toilet paper, you know what your damages are? That roll of toilet paper. Right? So that point of was it better to sue? Is it a more efficient use of our resources to sue, to seek that political, legal solution? Or is it better, more efficient for all of us to boycott that store? Right? To insist that this never happens again, to make sure it never happens again, to boycott that store such that it will no longer exist if it treats us badly. So I'm sure we may talk about that again now that that case is dropped, because I will be back on Michael Cord's show next Sunday. This past Sunday, we talked about taxes, death, and trouble, how fines, fees, and forfeitures are regressive and racist taxes. I've mentioned that on this show several times. Brother Cord wants me to come back and talk about that again this Sunday, so it'll be our third time on the show. But somehow, I don't know, we're going to have to talk about this Byron Jones case as well. So again, shout out to Brother Michael Cord. Shout out to WURD, and shout out to all those that are involved in black radio and trying to bring knowledge and whatnot to the people. So we're going to stop there. Again, we're under trying circumstances. We're all trying to do our best. We're going to keep this going, even if it's a little off or unorthodox. But we're going to keep for our people going, and we're going to try our best for March 30th for this to jump off 11 a.m. And hopefully at Hakim's with the thing lifted. But if not, we're going to figure something out. But we're going to be on Facebook Live 11 a.m. every Monday, just as we have been for the last 6 months. Know that we've been doing this for 6 months. Wow. And we're going to keep this going for another 6 months, another 6 years, another 60 years, just like Hakim's has been open since 1959, home of black books. So we're going to better educate ourselves and our children. We're going to start and patronize black businesses, and we're going to stop unduly criticizing each other, because that is the revolution that will never be televised. Accumulate human, social, financial, political capital. Hotep.